Good afternoon, everybody. Okay. Are you all okay?
Yes.
I hope your knees don't hurt too much. Okay. Yes, my name is Inigo Ordana. Uh, why am I here? Basically, I am going to help you with the 12 steps because I myself went through the 12 steps. And this is how I know about it. Um, I went through the 12 steps for the original reason why it was made. I was a drug dependent for 6 years and an alcoholic for 8 years. And I've been well for over 10 years now. And I understand that the 12 steps has been used for various reasons. It has been since its conception by the Alcoholics Anonymous and then the Narcotics Anonymous groups. It has been used for every form of recovery since then. And I understand that it is used here in Courage in particular for sexuality and sexual emotional dependence, which is good because it can be used for that. Because actually there are five major kinds of addiction, and we'll be talking about that more later in regards to the 12 steps itself. This was made a long time ago, the 12 steps, and it has helped hundreds of thousands of people. And the beautiful thing about the 12-step program is the fact that it's at your own pace. Okay? If you feel that you can go on to the next step, go ahead. If you feel that you are not yet ready for the next step, that's fine. Nobody is here to judge. Everybody goes at their own pace. And it can be used, as I said, for any form of recovery or any form of help or dependence that you may feel you have. And if it's sexual in orientation or in nature, that's fine. You can use it for that. Okay, so 12 steps. Little background on myself. As I said, I was a drug dependent for 6 years, but I went through the program under Bob Garan. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Garan. Robert Garan. He was a former La Salette priest. Also my mentor. And he taught me basically everything I know, aside from Doc Ed. Doc Ed was the reason why I know Edwin, and we were both under him as he was our guidance counselor. And just actually small world. First and only time I went to the Philippine Guidance and Counseling Association. I was working in Santo Tomas, Batangas because I had just finished the program. I had just gotten well. I was already sober for many years when that happened, and I was already on my feet. And I actually went to, what's her name again? Ronnie, that's right. I went to Ronnie's class, and it was about life coaching. Hello, welcome. I went to Ronnie's class. It was about life coaching, and when I was there, I was working for a school named Mother Barbara Micarelli School. First thing I did, I met a guy from Ateneo, Jan. He was another guidance counselor, and when I met him, I said, "Do you know Doc Ed? I have to get back in touch with him and thank him as part of the 12-step program." Because aside from making amends, you also have to thank the people that you're grateful to. And Doc Ed really helped me big time. Because when I was in high school, I was this close to getting kicked out. And Doc Ed said, "This kid has potential, let's not kick him out." Sayang. Because at the time, that was when I started taking drugs and messing my life up. So, I got back in touch with Doc Ed, and through Doc Ed, I met Edwin, and now I'm here. So, small world. So 12 steps. What is this all about? It's about any form of recovery. If you feel that you need help with anything in your personal life, something that you feel that you cannot get out of, something that you feel like you're having such a hard time controlling, this is the perfect program for you. It has developed over the years, but the 12 steps have remained the same. It's actually quite inspired the way it was meant to help and the way it was built and the way it has helped so many people ever since. So, with that, what is the first step? The first step is actually maybe arguably the most difficult step. So what's it about? Step 1. Can everybody please read? 1, 2, 3, go.
We admit we were powerless over loss and emotional dependency, and our lives have become unmanageable.
Okay, this is kind of adjusted. This is a bit of an adjusted version. Okay, this is particularly for the courage version of the 12 steps. Okay, originally this was we admit we were powerless over our addictions. That was the one I grew up with. So what does this mean? This is basically step 1 is acceptance. Acceptance that yes, I have a problem. Admittance to yourself. And the fact that you all are here, the fact that you all have joined together and formed this group and you help each other out, that itself is a form of admittance. That itself is a form of acceptance that okay, there is a problem. Some of you might be on different levels, different degrees of acceptance. Some of you may be on different wavelengths. Some of you may be 100% like, yes, Lord, please help me. You know, I'm here. I'm willing to change. Yes. Some of you might be thinking, maybe. I might have a problem. I'm new at this. I might have a problem. That's why I'm here. Needless to say, the fact that you are here is exactly this. You admit you are powerless over your lust and emotional dependency. And your lives have become unmanageable. So actually, back at the Bob Garen's, we had 4 keys. 4 keys to recovery. Acceptance was one of them. We called them oath or taho, whichever way you want to put it. Because they don't actually have a specific order. The A in taho is acceptance. Okay, that's openness, acceptance, trust, and humility. Without these 4 keys, you are lost. Without these 4 keys, you will not get well. So acceptance, the first key. Okay? Because if you do not accept that yes, I need help, if you do not accept that my lust or my addiction or whichever problem I have has gotten the best of me, I've done things that I don't like. I may have had thoughts. If it's thoughts, I believe that it may be very well manageable. Okay? But if you've done things, I think we can all agree it's a different story. If there are actions involved if there are acts that have proven the dependency, it becomes a totally different story there. Okay? Because I think we can all agree there are things that come back to us and then we get all these feelings and then we get all this guilt and then we get all this turmoil inside us. And it's so hard to get over that, right? And that's why you're all here. That's why you all help each other out. That's why I'm here. Okay? So step 1 is acceptance. Admitting powerlessness is a very hard thing. For normal people. For everybody, actually. Admitting powerlessness means that I could not control myself. And our pride, our ego, the id in us, everybody has that. Everybody has an ego. The id in us tells us that no, I have control over myself. I should be able to stop this. But sadly, that's not always the case. That wasn't the case for me. Okay? Because when I was dependent on drugs and alcohol and sex, I was a sex addict also for many years. And when I was dependent on all these things, why did I cling onto these things? Okay, so let's get a clearer picture of what we're talking about. So this is, if you Google dependence, this is what you'll see. Okay? So it's the state of relying on or being controlled by someone or something else. That something else doesn't have to be external. That something else could be inside us. There's a saying in the Alcoholics Anonymous groups, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I can never let my guard down. I cannot let my guard down. I cannot say, okay na ako. Wala na akong problema. I can go and do whatever I want. I can go out to clubs. My siblings yesterday, for example, they went to Tagaytay. They're out drinking now. Do I join them? No. I don't even really want to. Although there is that part of me, I have to admit, that thinks, okay, I used to do that. I remember that used to be a bit fun. But I cannot do that because I have to admit I am powerless. I don't want to set myself up. I don't want to fall back into that same pattern because I was dependent. Now, why did I become dependent on alcohol and drugs? When I talked to Edwin a couple of weeks ago, this is something that we both agreed on because I said, my problem was sort of different from what I am meant to talk about today. But it's still the 12 steps. But we both realized that the reason why I fell into dependence, although in a different form, was similar to some of the things that you guys might have felt. In the sense that, a little bit of backstory, when I was a teenager, everybody as a teenager is looking for their identity. That is true for everyone. Erik Erikson said that. Every great philosopher and behavioral scientist said that. And when you're a teenager, you are looking for the best version of yourself. Right? Everybody is looking for the best version of themselves, whichever they feel most comfortable with. Whichever version of themselves people like. Because at that age, socialization is everything. Yes, thank you. Okay, vote for me. Okay, so when I was a teenager, my family was a family of alcoholics, and so I got into alcohol relatively easy because alcohol has been also proven to be genetic in a lot of ways. Lineage of homosexuality, for example, has said to be sort of, in a way, genetic. It's not 100% proven. Neither is alcoholism 100% proven. But it's similar in that sense. And when I was a teenager, I got into alcohol relatively quickly. And from there, it escalated very quickly into drugs. When I got high and drunk, I became the life of the party. Before that, I was the quiet kid. Tahimik lang ako. I was kind of awkward. I was quiet. Ask Doc Ed. If you ask him, he'll say that I was the quiet kid in class, not really talking much, trying to find himself. And boom! Nung nakainom ako, wow! Biglang ibang tao. It's like The Mask. Have you seen The Mask? You put on the mask and life of the party. And I don't remember much during the party, but afterwards, people started saying, "Uy, saya mo kagabi. Okay ka." And what did I feel? Wow, people like me when I'm drunk. People like that version of me. So that might be the best version of me. I feel what? How did you feel when maybe someone from the same sex showed attraction to you? I feel appreciated. And right away, bam, I clung onto that identity of mine. I said, this is the best version of me. I like this version of me. People like it. So I should too. People don't like me when I'm sober. Diba? Or maybe some of you might have felt people from the opposite sex don't appreciate me as much. So the version of me, which is the reason why you're here, is the one you clung onto when you were building your identities, which everybody does. And I'm sure that a lot of people have the same struggles. And I would like to affirm you all. I would like to say congratulations to you all for having the strength to say that I want to be able to control myself. I want to be able to be a better person, because don't we all? So there, dependence. This is the reason why I'm here. I myself fell into dependence because I felt like that was where it started. I saw that as the best version of me. I clung on to that and I fell into it, and that became who I was. Inata ko sa utak ko, that's who I am. And some of you might have felt the same way. That is who I am. Does that mean that cannot change? It can. And this is exactly how to do it. So step one, admit that you are dependent on something. If it's emotional dependency, actually more than lust, everybody gets lust. Everybody feels lust. I don't believe that lust has to change. You have to control lust. I'm married now. I am chaste in the sense that I am loyal and faithful to my wife. This is my beautiful wife. Got married almost a year. Yes. Oh, more than lust, I feel like emotional dependency is something that I can relate to. Because as I said, I myself became dependent on sex and drugs and alcohol. And emotional dependency is big. It's a huge part of that. So many people that I went to therapy with are very, very emotionally dependent. You'd be surprised. I feel like, especially in the Filipino culture, emotional dependency is a huge problem. We cling on to our parents, and we have, for example, an uncle that's almost 50, and it was very, very difficult for him to get out of the emotional dependency from my lola. He's 50. Sad. But, at least he's learning now. So, it's unmanageable. And if you feel that towards the same sex, that's why we're here. It's that kind of emotional dependency that can get dangerous because you base too much of your identity. You base too much of yourself. You base so much of your own self-worth onto the opinion and the affection and affirmation of other people. That, brothers and sisters, that can be dangerous. Okay. So acceptance. And the fact that you're all here, this is, I think, covered. Good. Congratulations. A lot of the people that I went to therapy with, myself included, when I was brought to rehab to Bob Garan, I did not have this. I didn't go on my own volition. I did not go on my own free will. I was pushed. I was forced. I thought I was going to the beach. And then, bam! Where am I? Ganun. And that's why I'd like to affirm you for being here on your own accord. So step 2. Can we all please read step 2?
We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Okay. Power greater than ourselves. This is a very, very important thing. I think in general. Believing that there is a power greater than yourself in the first place. And courage, and this school in particular, I just asked Sister Coronel, who is her patron saint, St. Francis, and Mother Mary. Same as the school I used to work in Santo Tomas, St. Francis. It was a Franciscan school. That's very, very simple. You don't like aircon. Yeah, same. So, why is this so important? I think this is very clear. Because when you feel that you're powerless, the moment that you totally accept, oh my God, I'm powerless. Whoa. The reason why you fall into that dependency in the first place is because you feel a void. You feel that there's something incomplete. There's something missing inside you that you need to fill up. Right? And I filled it up with vices. You may have filled it up with whatever emotional dependency. Yeah, sexual partners, decisions that you might have made that you might have regretted. Me too. Same. I made so many decisions that I regret, that I wish I hadn't done, but then some part of me now, since I'm better now, feels that I never would have met my wife, I never would have met a lot of my good friends, I never would have gotten well if I hadn't gotten into those problems. So in a way, it's providential, in a way, and we'll see this in the 12th step, that these things were not accidental. These things are not just, they didn't just happen. This isn't like totally your fault. You know? These things happen to us for a reason, basically. But then the minute that you feel, oh my God, I am powerless over my lust. I'm powerless over my emotional dependency. That sucks. That's a horrible thing, if you think about it. Right? Once you come to this, I'm sure the first time you came to this session, you might have had this feeling like, oh, what am I doing here? Oh, good Lord, I'm powerless. I need these people's help. Hihina ako naman. That's not true, firstly. The fact that you're here means you're strong. But you might feel that way because the void is there again. Because that emptiness is there again. That part of you that you were trying to fill with that lust and with that emotional dependency, it's gone. Because you think you're powerless again. And that's why you need to fill it up. And the best way to fill that void up is with God. Again, for all of you, check, I think, right? I mean, we're here because of courage. Courage itself is a religious group. And I believe that the religious are awesome. I worked for them several times. Nuns in particular, they're very straight. They're very strict. Yes.
Nurturing at the same time.
Nurturing at the same time. When I was working with Franciscan nuns, I felt like I had like 10 moms. It was awesome. When I got sick, alagang-alaga ako anyway. So higher power. In the NA program, in the AA program, it's not strictly Jesus. It's not strictly the Catholic God. As long as you believe in a higher power, just believe in any God, and you're okay. For the Muslims, it's Allah. For Buddhists, I'm not sure who they worship, but there's somebody there. But yeah, it's not Buddha. Buddha is just the guy. Anyway, so yeah, there has to be a higher power. There's something bigger than you. Why? Because when you don't believe there's anybody bigger than you, which is a lot of people's problem nowadays, I noticed. Millennials have this problem big time. Ang yayabang nila. Which is a problem. I'm a millennial, by the way. Ang yayabang namin pala. Sorry. So, when you don't believe that there's a higher power, when you don't believe that there's someone bigger than you, what happens? You become very self-centered. And I was taught, and this is a fact that I've come across, selfishness is the thread, the common thread of all sin. I think it's okay, it's appropriate to get into morality at this point, we're talking about God. The common thread of all sin is selfishness. And it's near impossible not to become selfish when you don't believe that there's anything bigger than you. When the world revolves around you, you're gonna screw up, you're gonna hurt some people. And I did. Because for a long time, and this is true for a lot of teenagers, and maybe your problem might have started when you were a teenager. A lot of us make big mistakes when we're teenagers. Because teenagers have this tendency to think that they're the center of the universe, that the world revolves around them, and that they are the most important things in the world. Even if yung mga nagpapakamartir dyan, they still think that the world revolves around them. Like, woe is me. Why me? Me. And so they hurt people, they hurt themselves. So, we need this. We need to cling on to something. We need to cling on to God. And for me, this took a while. This step in particular, it took me several years. Because if you met me a while back, way before Rani met me, I was a very arrogant kid, let's just say. Ask Doc Ed, if he ever comes here, I think he'd be open to giving a talk. I was a very arrogant kid, which is why I made a lot of mistakes. And when I was with Bob Garan, he had a saying, God is the center of our recovery. And I got well, I can say this 100%, because God saved me. I can't explain, it's hard to explain matters of faith, but it was Easter Sunday of 2008. I just cried. My friend who's a priest, Father Anthony, who's a friend of ours, he raised the host, and he was saying Mass during Easter Sunday, and I just cried. I just felt like, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? I need to get my life together. I need to get a hold of myself. And how do I do that? I can't do that by myself. Step 1. I can only do that with him. Step 2. And that's when I really started getting on. And then, step 3 came. And we all please read step 3. 1, 2, 3, go.
We made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves.
Okay, again, this is part of the acceptance and openness. Okay? Part of the acceptance and openness. Actually, the first step, openness, acceptance, trust, and humility, all of those are actually immediately involved. You can't just be admitting something without being open about it. You cannot just accept something. Well, you can, but it's more meaningful if you accept something and share it with somebody else, because then you're not alone. And the whole admittance part is included in the opening, in the sharing of it. Humility, check. So all those 4 keys are actually true in the first step pala. First step pala, nandun na yun. You have the keys. But there are certain moments later, you'll see, there are certain steps where there may be some keys that might be more vital than others. In this step, it's still very important, the admittance, the acceptance part. But what we went through, we wrote about it, which could be homework for some of you guys. I won't be here to check your homework. But if you meet every Sunday, if you meet constantly, and if you share about your own problems constantly, this would be a good practice. What we did at the Garen's Ranch, we wrote guilts. We wrote our guilts. Rock bottom moments is what we called it, RBM. It was very, very important, very, very difficult. Because there's a part of you that tells yourself, light lang naman yun eh, minor lang naman yun eh. If it's so minor, why is it so hard for you to write it down? You would get confronted every day about that. Ba't ayaw mo isulat kung sobrang minor lang? Sulat mo. Just write about it. And that heals you. I wrote so much at the ranch, I became a journalist. I became an English teacher. And I now work in a communications division because I still keep writing. I write hundreds of emails a week. And that's where it started. I wrote my RBMs. And I wrote about my rock bottom moments. What does that mean? My rock bottom moments include one, sexually hurting a cousin of mine is a rock bottom moment. I was high at the time. That's a guilt that's not easy to get over. I felt so bad about that. I lost my flippin' mind because of that. It was very difficult for me to get over that. I had 2 nervous breakdowns. The first one was because I felt so guilty about that, aside from the drugs. But I felt so guilty about that. And I did not open it up fully until I was in Nazareth, until I was with the Garens. And because you need a fearless moral inventory. You need to write down what you've done, the people you've hurt. If it's in regard to emotional dependency, I hope you hadn't hurt anybody as bad. But because of my sex addiction, I did. I was in an all-boys school. I was studying in Ateneo, and I was lusting. And the only person around was my cousin, and I hurt her. And I feel really bad about it. I've apologized many times, which is a later step. And right away, I'm able to admit it to you. Because I feel like I'm not that person anymore. I'm better now. And when I say that, I tell myself, don't be that person. And I'm able to help people that might have had the same problem. And doing that searching, that introspection, that self-study, that's tough. There's so many, and I imagine it's much more difficult for you because this is sort of like an open, it's a willing thing. I mean, you guys are doing this on your own volition, which again, I'd like to affirm you, that's great. I did not. I was kind of forced into getting well at first. But you don't really get well until you decide, which is a later step again. But when I did this, I was kind of told to do it. If you do this, you'd be willing to do this. It would be your own choice to do this. To write down the things that you have done wrong. That's huge. That's a big step in change. And if you're willing to do that, you're very courageous people indeed. And that introspection is more difficult when you're outside also because there's so many distractions. You know? Even now, I mean, I like meditation, I like prayer. I feel like those things continue to save me every day. But, I mean, with my phone, between my phone and my TV and my laptop, and so many different distractions in the world, it's tough. But I urge you to do this because if you really want to change yourselves in any way, if you really feel convinced and compelled to do something about whichever problem you may feel, and at whatever degree you may feel it, this is very important. So if you're going to do something, because I feel like step 1 and 2 are covered. If you're going to do step 3, write it down and talk about it next week. Or whichever week you guys are going to meet again. Because this is important. And talking about it off the cuff means straight off the top of your head, is different when you write it down because you really introspectively think about it and think about it a lot. And the deeper you think about it, the more you reflect on it, the deeper the change. So I urge you, this is good, do this. Okay, step 4. Can we all please read step 4? 1, 2, 3, go.
We admit to God, ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
Very connected to step 3. So writing it down actually within the week, while you're working, after work, whichever time you're free, whichever time you feel like doing it, if you're going to do that tonight, that is step 3. The time that you all meet up again and share, that's a totally different story. When I would share with my brothers and sisters back at the ranch, it was very, very deeply emotional. And when you do that, when you make yourself vulnerable like that, you become very connected in a very, yeah. I felt very connected to the people I was with back at the ranch. And they were like brothers and sisters to me. And because they were my support group. And that's exactly what you are. And this is why the 12 steps are very, very important for you. Because you are a support group. That's huge. That's very important. Support is what gets us through. My wife and I, we support each other. And she keeps me sober every day. If she wasn't around, I might have gone with my brother and sister up to Tagaytay and I might be drinking now. And I'm screwed. Like, I wouldn't be able to give this talk. Diba? Support is everything. I feel like the proper support, and sometimes, you know, a lot of times, especially in high school, when I was in high school, the support group I had was horrible. It was a horrible, horrible support group that, oy, pare, you know mo, yan. Problem solved. Not really. And a lot of you might have felt like which is true for a lot of people that become emotionally dependent, you had a problem. A lot of people have problems, everybody has problems. And when I had a problem in high school, I clung on to those friends and they were family. They were my family. And they said, pare, you know, pare drugs, pare ganyan, ito, babae, yan, ito, to. And you might have clung to someone that's of the same sex and they said they might have taken advantage, which happens. We actually coined the term back at the ranch, affectionate seduction.
That's for abusive.
That's for abuse, which is a totally different talk in itself. But that could be the cause for a lot of problems of this nature. And so admitting that to other people can be very difficult, can be very emotional, but it's very enlightening as well. Because when you're able to do that, you lighten your load. You say, brother, sister, help me out. Tulungan mo naman ako. Hirap na hirap ako dito sa problema ko. And here, this is what it is. And here, help me carry this. And when your friend is a sincere friend that does not take advantage of you in any way and wants to really help you, they say, here, let me carry that with you. brother, sister. And that's the beauty of this step. When I did this, I felt like I had a new family, which is why the toxic family that I had, I'm not so connected to them anymore, which is great. Because I don't need that kind of support. I had to burn bridges. And I did. And because I clung on to a whole new set of good friends and family, which saved my life. And that's what you are to each other. So congratulations, you already have this. And that's openness.
You are only as sick as the secrets you keep.
That's true. And that rots inside
It's
you.
the secrecy. It's the shame that makes you sick. It deepens the sickness. So when you are able to verbalize even the ugliest things, the things that you can't even bear to look back on, the things that it's so painful to think about, so shameful, and you can't even imagine saying it. You don't know how liberating it is to actually say it to another person and to be accepted. And you have to be, as a support group, you have to be open-minded to the things that your brothers and your sister will say, because in the ranch, that's where we met actually.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I didn't
you guys
know.
know,
Yes.
that's where we met. I was there
Yes.
for an eating disorder. So, but we never got into a relationship while we were at the center, because that's bawal. That's bawal. But I think a few years after we met again, syempre, you
Because
have,
we became really good friends.
We
We were
became
very
really
good
good
friends. And
like,
8
I knew
years.
the smell of his utot. I knew all his bad habits. I knew all his good habits, and he knew mine. And I think that's the best kind of relationship that you can have. It's a relationship that's founded on acceptance. So, yeah. So if you have a relationship that's founded on acceptance, when the other person that you know can accept you and love you on the worst days of your life, and at the same time the best days of your life, you know that you've met the right person. So it's, but like whenever we talk at the center, we have a no judgment zone wherein we sit in a circle. There's absolutely no judgment, no, actually we don't even talk about morality, because we try to keep it as clinical as possible. So we just talk so we can be able to express freely. And I've heard people confessing to murder. I've heard priests confessing to raping children. And I've had to keep a very straight face, because you have to think of it as a cleansing experience for them to be able to say that to you. It takes a lot of courage.
Because the fact that they're saying it means
That
they
they're
want to
saying
change it. They don't want to do it anymore.
It doesn't sound good to them as well when they say it. If it doesn't sound good to you, it doesn't sound good to them. And it's a secret that they've kept at the deepest corner of their minds. And if they're saying it to you, take it as an honor and as a privilege that they are saying it to you. It means they trust you. So I think that would be a good exercise, because it's very empowering.
And what we do is we have what we call the trust circle, which is we form a circle. We did this every day back at the ranch. We formed a circle, and one by one, we would share our write-ups. And it was very emotional, and it was very enlightening, and it was very beautiful.
And the rules of the trust circle is that if somebody talks about their story, if they share something, you're not allowed to talk about it outside of the
It
circle.
stays what is talked about in the circle
And if
does
they
not go
say
outside.
it, halimbawa, you open up something to me, I can't talk to him about it. I can only talk to him about my story. But I can't talk to, if he wants to share about his story, that's your own. But you can't talk about each other's stories. That's just gossip, and that kind of breaks the trust. And those are the rules of the trust circle. So what is in the circle, what is discussed in the circle, stays in the circle, and that's what makes it, a free environment for you to share.
Yes. So, and I believe that you seem like very sincere people.
Yeah.
I think you can all trust each other.
Yeah.
So that's good. So step 4. This was a big step for us. And once we had that feeling that you are 100% supported, and that there are people with you You have a team, you have a support group, you have a family that wants to make you better, make you a better person. And as she said, for her it was an eating disorder. So it actually works for many different forms of problems.
Which is also a form of dependency.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's also identity and everything.
Identity.
So actually, it's all underlying. It's sort of the same. Um, it's under the same thing, under the same umbrella. So step 5. Can we all please read step 5? 1, 2, 3, go.
We made the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand you.
Okay, surrender. This part is between you and the Lord. There's no proven way to really tell your brother or your sister that, hey, I've surrendered myself. No, this is, if you say, okay, I'm ready for step 6, there's no one to say that, no, you're not. Diba? There's no one that can say, wait, well, I didn't see you pray the other day. Wait lang. Hey, we were praying the rosary the other day and you didn't even, you were just quiet. You weren't saying the words. So I don't think you're ready for step 2. No. When somebody says they're ready for step 6, that means that he or she has come to a particular place in the relationship with God where they have already done this. This is a very personal, very spiritual aspect of the 12 steps. And there is no person, there is no other human being aside from you that can tell whether you're ready for step 6 when you are done with step 5. Because when you feel that you are ready, when you feel that you have done this, you just know. And some of you might have already done it. Some of you, which is the beauty of the 12 steps, is that some of you might be further along the 12 steps than others. Some people join the 12 steps and they've already done this. They've already given themselves up to God. And why is surrender so important? And it's very connected to the second step. And a lot of these steps are very intertwined. It's because spiritually, only God can really save us. Of course, it takes a lot of will, a lot of your own will to move forward. But as we said in the first step, we can't do it alone. We have a saying, you alone can do it, but you cannot do it alone. So it's of your own choice that you do this. It's of your own choice and will to get well. But the only way you're going to do it is to ask for help from each other and ask for help from God. To get to a spiritual note a little bit, the reason why there's Father, Son, Holy Spirit, in my opinion, and this was taught to me by a priest, is because it reaches all levels of humanity. Father, above and beyond us, omnipotent, omniscient, and everything. Above, in control of everything. There is no such thing as time. He controls everything. Son, who is with us. So there's one above us. There is a brother that loves us, that is with us. Our friend, our brother. A person who is there walking the path with us, carrying us when we need to be carried. And Holy Spirit, who is in us. So there's one above, there's one with us, and there's one inside us. It's all around. God is everything and everywhere. I am. And when you turn yourself over to that care, you understand that God is in your brothers and your sister here. God is in me. And something I learned last week, because I meditate almost every week with a group as well. And I learned last week that one way to deal with a problem, a lot of us, and this is, I know this is the very Catholic, it's more, I think it's very rampant with Catholics, where we feel that we're always so worried about our sin. We're always so caught up with our sin. And I don't like that so much, because at the ranch, Tito Bob, who was a former priest, he taught us that God is bigger than our sin, which is true. And what I learned last week, instead of praying that, Lord, ang laki ng problema ko. Lord, ang laki ng problema ko, tulungan mo naman ako. Please, this is this problem is bigger than me. Instead of you thinking of your problem as bigger than you, talk to your problem and say, problema, laki ng Diyos ko. Yan ka lang. My God is so much bigger than you. You might be a problem. You might be a big problem to me because I'm just human. I'm just a man. But my God, who is in me, is so much bigger than you. So you're nothing. I can beat you. I can solve this problem by understanding that my God, who is in my heart, who is with my brothers and sisters, is everywhere. So, with that knowledge, with that thinking, not to get arrogant because you need help,